It's kind of embarrassing to admit now, but the moment I opened the gift box, I actually rolled my eyes. It was supposed to be our anniversary present, yet what I found inside was the last thing I expected. My name is Victoria. I'm 34 years old, and looking back, I know I didn't react very well. My husband, Ethan, was sitting across the table with this hopeful smile, watching me like he'd just given me something truly amazing. But it didn't feel amazing to me. Inside the box was a bracelet. It wasn't anything expensive or eye-catching. Just a simple silver bracelet with one tiny little charm hanging from it. Don't get me wrong, I'm not the kind of woman who expects diamonds wrapped around my wrist. Still, for our 5th wedding anniversary, I honestly thought he would come up with something more meaningful. I was hoping for a gift that felt personal, romantic, and unforgettable. Do you like it? He asked softly, studying my face as if he was desperately trying to figure out what I was thinking. I forced myself to smile, but it looked completely fake. Yeah, it's cute, I replied, though I couldn't hide the disappointment in my voice. You know exactly the kind of tone I'm talking about. The one that practically screams, I'm pretending. The moment Ethan heard it, his smile disappeared, and I was hit with a mix of guilt and irritation. I didn't want to ruin our anniversary, but at the same time I couldn't stop thinking, why does he always do this? Ethan knows I like beautiful things. I've never exactly kept that a secret. For months I'd been casually mentioning this necklace I found online, dropping hint after hint, and instead I ended up with a bracelet that looked like it came from one of those little mall jewelry stands. I know how shallow that probably sounds. Believe me, I do. But there's more to the story. Ethan and I had already been through a rough year. Ever since his hours at work were cut, money had become a constant source of stress. I'd been doing everything I could to help us stay afloat. I even skipped a couple of my salon appointments to save extra money, and that wasn't easy for me because I've always cared about taking care of my appearance. So maybe, just maybe, I was hoping for something that showed he noticed everything I'd been sacrificing. Was that really asking for too much? I carefully placed the bracelet back into its box, set it on the table, and simply said, "Thanks." Even before the words left my mouth, I knew I'd already ruined the moment. Ethan let out a long sigh, the kind that sounded equal parts exhausted and defeated. "You don't like it," he said. It wasn't even a question. I folded my arms across my chest. "It's not that I don't like it," I answered. "I just thought. I don't know. Maybe you would have put a little more thought into what you got me." "Vicky, we're broke," he shot back. His voice was louder than usual, and it caught me completely by surprise. Ethan almost never raised his voice at me. "I can't exactly spend a fortune right now," he continued. "I honestly thought this was something you'd enjoy wearing." "That's not the point," I fired back immediately. "It isn't about how much it cost. It's about making an effort. You didn't even ask me what I actually wanted." His jaw tightened, and I could tell he was fighting to stay calm. "Effort?" he repeated. "Are you serious? Do you have any idea how hard I worked just to buy that bracelet? Do you know how many extra hours I put in just so I could afford something decent?" "Halfway decent," I muttered quietly under my breath. That was the moment everything completely fell apart. "You know what, Vicky?" Ethan snapped. "I can't win with you. No matter what I do, it's never enough. You're always focused on what you don't have instead of appreciating what you do." His words were sharp enough to make my chest tighten. I stood up from the table, still hugging my arms to my chest, and stared right at him. "Maybe if you actually stepped up once in a while," I said, "I wouldn't have to keep pointing out everything that's missing." The second those words came out of my mouth, I knew I'd hit a nerve. But I was too angry to take them back. Ethan's expression went completely cold. He leaned back in his chair and looked at me like I was someone he'd never met before. "Step up," he repeated slowly, almost daring me to say it again. "I've been doing everything I possibly can just to keep us afloat, Vicky. Meanwhile, the only thing you seem to care about is whether I can keep you happy." Then he added something that stopped me cold. God forbid you actually care about me for once. I didn't have a response. I just stood there staring at him, completely blindsided. Ethan had never spoken to me like that before. We'd had plenty of arguments over the years, but this one felt different. It felt like something between us had finally broken. And I wasn't sure it could ever be fixed. Not knowing what else to do, I turned around, walked into the bedroom, and slammed the door behind me. Part of me expected him to come after me like he always did, to apologize, calm things down, and somehow make everything okay. But this time he never came. He stayed in the kitchen. I could hear him putting away dishes and cleaning up, every movement loud and deliberate, almost as if he wanted me to hear every second of it. I threw myself onto the bed and stared up at the ceiling. My heart was pounding while anger, guilt, and confusion all fought for space inside my head. I wanted to blame him for ruining our anniversary, but deep down I couldn't ignore the possibility that maybe I'd taken things way too far. Then again, wasn't some of this his fault too? Why couldn't he understand what I actually needed? I started thinking about everything I believed I'd given up for him. I could have ended up with someone who had his life completely together. Someone who could have given me the kind of future I'd always imagined. Instead, I chose Ethan. And what did that leave me with? A cheap bracelet and an argument that made me feel lonelier than I'd ever felt in my own marriage. As I lay there in the dark, one thought kept creeping into my mind. Maybe we'd finally reached the point where there was no coming back. I barely slept that night. Ethan never came into the bedroom, and when I woke up the next morning, he was already gone. His side of the bed hadn't even been touched, and the silence in the kitchen felt almost unsettling. When I went to pour myself a cup of coffee, the bracelet was still sitting exactly where I'd left it. The tiny charm reflected the morning sunlight, almost like it was silently making fun of me. I looked away from it and picked up my phone instead. I sent Ethan a text. Asterisk, are we really going to let one argument ruin our anniversary? Can we please talk? Asterisk. Nothing. Hours passed without a single reply. That wasn't like Ethan at all. Even after our worst fights, he'd always cool off eventually and come back ready to work things out. This time felt completely different. It honestly felt like he was finished with us. By lunchtime, my frustration had reached its limit. I kept replaying everything that had happened the night before, over and over again, twisting the memories until I convinced myself I was the one who'd been wronged. How could he just leave on our anniversary of all days? Who does something like that? Sure, I hadn't reacted perfectly to the gift, but was that really enough for him to walk away? Needing someone to tell me I wasn't crazy, I called my best friend, Lauren. She answered before the phone even rang a third time. What's wrong? She asked immediately, her voice filled with concern. I didn't hold anything back. Ethan and I had a huge fight last night, I said. He gave me this cheap bracelet for our anniversary, and when I tried to explain how I felt, he completely lost it. Lauren stayed quiet for a few seconds. I could tell she was carefully choosing her words, probably trying not to make things worse. Okay, she finally said. So what exactly did you say to him? I hesitated before answering. I just told him I thought he could have put more effort into my gift. It wasn't about how much money he spent. I just wanted something that showed he really cared. That's reasonable, right? Right, Lauren replied. But the way she said it made it obvious she wasn't completely agreeing with me. So, she asked carefully, how did he respond? He got defensive. I lost it, I told Lauren. He immediately turned the whole conversation into how hard he's been working and how ungrateful I am. Like I'm just supposed to smile and accept whatever little scraps he decides are good enough for me. It isn't fair, Lauren. I do so much for him, and I barely ask for anything in return. She replied, and I could tell she was biting her tongue. There was definitely more she wanted to say. Listen, Vic. I'm not saying you don't have a right to be disappointed. But maybe there was a better way to handle it. Ethan's been under a lot of pressure lately. I don't want to hear about his stress, I interrupted before she could finish. What about me? I'm the one holding everything together while he sits around feeling sorry for himself because of work. The least he could do is show me he appreciates everything I've been doing. Lauren let out a long sigh. Okay, so what happens now? Are you going to talk to him when he gets home? If he even comes home, I muttered. Of course he'll come home, she answered, although she didn't sound nearly as confident as her words. Just take a minute before you say anything. Figure out what you actually want to tell him. I ended the call feeling even more annoyed than before. Lauren didn't understand me. Honestly, nobody seemed to. Everyone always treated Ethan like he was some kind of hero just because he was trying his best. But what about me? Wasn't I trying too? I'd sacrificed plenty to keep our lives together, yet nobody ever seemed to recognize that. By late afternoon, he still hadn't answered a single text or call. The anxiety slowly started creeping in, but I pushed it down and replaced it with anger. If Ethan wasn't willing to come to me, then I'd go find him. I got in my car and drove to the small insurance agency downtown where he'd worked ever since graduating college. When I pulled into the parking lot, his car wasn't there. I called him again. Straight to voicemail. That's when it really hit me. He wasn't there at all. I drove home almost on autopilot while my mind raced through every possible explanation. Was he with a friend? Sitting alone in some bar? Somewhere I didn't know about? For one brief moment, an ugly thought crossed my mind, that maybe he was with someone else. My stomach immediately twisted into knots. I shoved the idea away. Ethan wasn't that kind of man. He'd never struck me as someone who would cheat or disappear without a word. At least, that's what I believed. When I finally pulled into our driveway, I saw his car sitting there. Relief washed over me for a split second. Then it disappeared just as quickly, replaced by fresh anger. I marched into the house, completely ready for another confrontation. But the moment I stepped into the living room, every word I planned to say vanished. Ethan was sitting on the couch with his head buried in his hands. He looked more defeated than I'd ever seen him. He didn't even bother looking up when I walked in. "Where the hell have you been?" I demanded, throwing my purse onto the coffee table. Slowly, he raised his head. His eyes were bloodshot, and he looked completely drained. "I needed some time to think," he said in a flat, emotionless voice. "To think about what?" I fired back. "How to avoid your wife. How to make me feel miserable on our anniversary?" Ethan slowly shook his head. A bitter little smile appeared on his face. "You really don't get it, do you, Vicky? This isn't about the bracelet. It isn't even about our anniversary. It's about us. This marriage isn't working anymore." His words landed like a punch straight to my stomach. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "Of course it's working. We've gotten through worse fights than this." "Have we?" he replied quietly, sounding completely worn out. "Because it doesn't feel that way anymore. It feels like nothing I ever do is enough for you. I tried to give you something that showed I cared. But that isn't what you want. You want someone who can give you everything. And I'm not that man. I never have been." I opened my mouth to argue. Nothing came out. Deep inside, I knew there was some truth to what he was saying. I did want more. More than Ethan could ever realistically give me. More than he probably ever would. Still, wasn't that his problem instead of mine? "I just need you to try harder," I finally whispered, my voice shaking. Ethan laughed. There wasn't a trace of happiness in it. It sounded cold, bitter, and completely exhausted. "Try harder," he repeated. "Vicky, I've been trying for years. And all I ever get is the feeling that you look at me like I'm a failure." "Maybe if you weren't such a disappointment," I shouted before I could stop myself, "I wouldn't have to." The expression on his face disappeared completely. For just a moment, it was like every emotion inside him had shut off. Right then, I knew I'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Without saying another word, he stood up, picked up his keys, and looked at me with an expression I'll never forget. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was acceptance. "I'll come back for the rest of my things," he said quietly. Then he walked out. After the front door closed behind him, I just stood there frozen. I couldn't believe he actually left. How could he act like I was the one ruining everything? The shock faded quickly. Before long, all that remained was rage. How dare he make me out to be the villain after everything I'd tolerated over the years? The rest of that evening, I wandered around the house, unable to sit still. My thoughts spiraled further and further out of control. Ethan still hadn't come back. And the longer he stayed away, the angrier I became. I started remembering every time I'd covered for him. Every excuse I'd made to our friends. Every explanation I'd given to family. And this was how he repaid me? By storming off like some dramatic victim simply because I'd told him the truth? But underneath all that anger, another emotion slowly began pushing its way to the surface. Fear. Ethan might not have much money, but if he actually decided to divorce me, I'd be in serious trouble. I wasn't naive. I understood exactly how life worked. If we split up, there wasn't much I could count on. He didn't have hidden savings. There was no wealthy family waiting to help him. No trust fund. Nothing. The thought of trying to support myself, paying rent, covering bills, and working some miserable job just to survive, made me sick. The idea of being single again scared me even more. I wasn't 22 anymore, with my whole future ahead of me. I was 34. I still looked good, and I'd worked hard to make sure of that. But I also knew how dating worked. Finding someone new only gets harder as you get older. Especially someone capable of giving me the kind of life I believed I deserved. No. Divorce simply wasn't an option. Not for me. I needed a strategy. And I needed one fast. If Ethan thought he could walk away and leave me dealing with the consequences, he was badly mistaken. I wasn't going to let that happen. Not if I had anything to say about it. By the following morning, I already knew exactly how I was going to handle things. I decided I'd play the role of the remorseful, apologetic wife, at least long enough to pull him back in and regain control of the situation. The truth was, I didn't actually feel sorry. Why should I? In my mind, he'd started this whole mess by being weak and giving up so easily. Still, I knew Ethan. He'd fallen for my apologies before. I figured he probably would again. He didn't come home until late the following afternoon. The second I saw him, I could tell he looked terrible. He seemed exhausted, like he hadn't slept at all. His clothes were wrinkled, and the tension in his shoulders made it obvious he was barely holding himself together. Good, I thought. That meant he was vulnerable. The instant he stepped inside, I softened my face, making sure I looked just hurt enough and just remorseful enough to be believable. "Ethan," I said quietly as I took a careful step toward him. "Can we talk?" He looked at me with tired eyes, almost like he couldn't decide whether to stay or turn around and leave again. "What is there left to talk about?" he asked without any emotion. I feel terrible about everything that happened," I said, keeping my voice soft and unsteady. "I never wanted to hurt you. I was overwhelmed. And I took all of those feelings out on you. I'm so sorry, Ethan." He blinked in surprise. "You're sorry?" he asked, sounding like he wasn't sure he believed me. "Yes," I answered, forcing every word to sound sincere. "I know I've been really hard on you lately, and that wasn't fair. I love you, Ethan. I don't want our marriage to fall apart because of one terrible fight. Please," I whispered. "Can't we just put all of this behind us and start over?" I reached for his arm, gently brushing my hand against it. For just a second, I thought I was getting through to him. The way he looked at me made it seem like part of him wanted to believe every word I was saying. It looked like he wanted to forgive me. Then everything changed. His expression turned cold, and he slowly pulled his arm away. "You don't mean any of this," he said quietly. His voice had no warmth left in it. "You're only telling me what you think I want to hear." That completely caught me off guard. Normally, Ethan would have softened by then. He'd always been the kind of man who gave in too easily. But not this time. "What are you talking about?" I asked, doing my best to sound wounded. "Of course I mean it." He slowly shook his head. "No, you don't. You're not sorry, Vicky. You've never really been sorry. You just don't want to deal with the consequences of what you've done." My heart started pounding, but I forced myself to keep a calm expression. "That isn't true," I replied, letting my voice shake just enough to sound believable. "I love you, Ethan. I'm trying to fix this." "Are you?" he asked immediately. "Because from where I'm standing, it seems like the only person you care about is yourself." He held my gaze without blinking. "You don't respect me, Vicky. You never have. And I'm done pretending that I'm okay with that." For a moment, I was speechless. Ethan had never talked to me that way before, and hearing those words stung far more than I expected. Then the panic came rushing back. I realized I couldn't let him walk away. If he thought he was leaving me, he was wrong. I'd fight him every step of the way if I had to. "Ethan, please," I said, my voice cracking. "Don't do this. We can fix everything. I'll do whatever it takes." He looked at me for a long time. It almost felt like he was deciding whether I was even worth another chance. Finally, he sighed. "I don't know if I can keep doing this anymore," he said quietly. "I'll stay, for now. But things have to change." I nodded as though I completely agreed. Inside my head, though, I was already thinking several moves ahead. There was no way I was going to let him dictate the future of our marriage. If he believed he was suddenly in control, he was mistaken. I wasn't going to let him leave me. And I definitely wasn't going to lose the little bit of security I still had. If everything fell apart, I was prepared to take every last thing he owned. I wanted him to regret ever believing he could simply walk away from me. For the time being, though, I knew exactly what I had to do. I had to play nice. I had to let him think he was in charge. I had to convince him I was willing to change. But deep down, I knew the truth. I didn't respect Ethan anymore. Not as my husband. Not even as a man. The only reason I was still in that marriage was because I didn't have a better option. Over the next several weeks, Ethan barely acknowledged my existence. The atmosphere inside the house was painfully tense, filled with everything we refused to say out loud. Every day followed the same routine. He went to work. He came home. He ate quietly. Then he slept on the couch. Meanwhile, I kept pretending to be the apologetic wife. I stayed in character for as long as I could. It didn't make any difference. He continued drifting farther and farther away from me. Eventually, reality hit me like a brick. Ethan was finished. No fake apology. No guilt. No manipulation. None of it was going to bring him back. If he really intended to leave, then I needed to be ready. And if I couldn't stop him, I'd make sure he regretted the decision for the rest of his life. One evening, after yet another dinner filled with complete silence, I finally broke. "Are we ever going to talk about this, Ethan?" I demanded, slamming my fork against the table. "Or are you just going to keep acting like I don't exist?" He didn't even take his eyes off the television. "What's left to talk about, Vicky?" he asked. "You don't want to change. And I can't keep living like this." I let out a sarcastic laugh. "Oh, so now I'm the problem? You're the one who walked out. You're the one who decided this marriage wasn't worth fighting for." Finally, he turned toward me. There was a sadness in his eyes that honestly made me uncomfortable. "Vicky," he said quietly, "I've been fighting for this marriage ever since the day we got married. You're the one who stopped. All you see when you look at me is a paycheck. And even that paycheck is never big enough for you. His words hit me hard. I refused to let him see it. Instead, I threw my hands into the air in frustration. Fine. If that's really how you feel, maybe we should just end this. His face never changed. Maybe we should. Those 3 words hung in the room. For a split second, I thought I was about to cry. Instead, I felt pure anger. He wasn't supposed to agree. He was supposed to beg me to stay. He was supposed to promise he'd try harder. He was supposed to fight for us. Instead, he accepted it. Great, I snapped. I'll call a lawyer tomorrow. He simply nodded. Do whatever you think you need to do. The divorce was ugly. Far uglier than I ever imagined.